Hey folks, this is Riker with a Diablo 4 video on the best Druid build. Today we're talking about the Pulverize Druid. And while in Season 2 the Druid has a lot of really good endgame build options, and I'm sure some people are going to argue that there's some other build at endgame that is surpassing Pulverize, here's why I'm saying that Pulverize is the best Druid build. Because leveling 1 to 50, Pulverize, one of your best options. 50 to 70, before you're really geared, Pulverize, one of your best options. 70 to 100, at level 100, continuing on, optimized, Pulverize, still one of your best options. If you want the one build to rule them all, one build that you don't have to change from, if you just want to have one build in your mind, not focus on getting gear for a bunch of different builds, you just want to keep your life simple, straightforward, and run the same build and continue to gear and improve that same build from 1 to 100 and beyond, Pulverize can destroy everything in the game. There might be some specialized tools that might outperform it in some circumstances, but Pulverize can do and demolish all the content. It's really tanky, it's simple to play, it's fun, it's satisfying, it's not gear dependent, and when you get the one hard to get aspect, it really comes online. But even without it, it still performs very well. In this video, we're going to go over 4 variants of this build. Your leveling 1 to 50 variant, your I'm a fresh level 50 with no gear variant, your I'm pretty decently geared variant, and then your final GG best version of this build which requires a couple of uniques. Again though, you don't have to run the super best GG version, but if you happen to get the required unique, then you can absolutely dominate. In the video description, you can find written guides to these builds on maxroll.gg. I worked with Maxroll's Boiler to bring you this guide. He's a Druid expert. He gave me the super endgame GG footage, so the footage you're seeing is a mixture of my lower level footage before I'm fully geared and then his super version of the build. We'll start by talking about the leveling 1 to 50. What is your skill rotation? What skills are you using with this build? Well, as per the name, Pulverize is your main skill. This is a werebear skill. When you activate it, you turn into a werebear. You bring a slam down in front of you, a nice little area of effect attack. If while leveling you happen to get the Shockwave offensive aspect, then you will destroy everything. So that's what would change this build. So, as we've said in our class tier list, Druids aren't great at leveling. But if you get the Shockwave aspect, now you become S tier at leveling. You gotta get really lucky though. It took me really long to find my Shockwave, but even without it, you're still fine. Shockwave makes Pulverize create a Shockwave that travels forward, more area, dealing up to double damage. And this could actually double dip damage. There's 2 damage areas. There's your own Pulverize area, and then there's the Shockwave area, and once you get Shockwave aspect, you need to start to learn to position your character such that you're hitting enemies with both. For the generator, we're taking Wind Shear, Fierce Wind Shear. This gives us Spirit, it makes enemies vulnerable, which is 20% more damage, very important, and it gives us a movement speed buff, which we're really lacking at low level. Druids are slow. Next, we're taking Earthen Bulwark, huge, powerful defensive skill. Not only are you getting a defensive shield, if you use this reactively, if you get crowd control, you pop this and you become unstoppable, you break out of crowd control. For mobility, we're taking Trample. Savage Trample makes it also generate 40 spirit. We're going to be very spirit thirsty while we're growing up. For our ultimate, we're taking Grizzly Rage. More damage, more toughness, it just makes us altogether better at everything that we do. Lastly, we're working in Poison Creeper. Now, at low level, Poison Creeper is actually really powerful. When you run into a big pack of enemies, pop Poison Creeper. It's going to do a lot of poison damage in a big area over time. Now let's go step by step in the skill tree here. So you're going to put your first point in Wind Shear, then Enhanced Wind Shear, then Pulverize, Enhanced Pulverize, Fierce Wind Shear. Then we're taking Primal Pulverize. From there, max out Pulverize, that's our main damage dealer, and as you're playing, when you're using Pulverize, don't just spam it willy-nilly. It's really expensive. Really try to hit as many enemies as you can with it. Once you've maxed Pulverize, take the passive Heart of the Wild. This increases your max spirit by 3. And then you're grabbing Poison Creeper. This is going to be a huge damage spike for you. Go all the way to Ferocious Poison Creeper. Even more duration on that dot. Damage over time. From there, put 2 points into the passive Clarity. Gain 2 spirit when transforming into human form. It is very difficult to generate spirit with this build, especially early levels, so we gotta help ourselves out here. Next, you want to get Trample all the way to Savage Trample. Again, it's a Spirit Potion and Mobility at the same time. Use it to traverse distances a little faster to move your slow werebear butt. And then you put your last point into Clarity. It's somewhere around here that you're going to be unlocking your Druid Spirit Boons. We'll talk about those in a bit, but don't wait for after all of your skills to be leveled up to do these. You want to be doing your Druid quests as soon as possible. Again, we'll more on that in a bit. Next, you're going to take Earthen Bulwark all the way to Preserving Earthen Bulwark. Preserving gives you additional Fortify. This is what's going to make us super tanky. It's one of the many things that makes us super tanky. Fortify, a really good thing for druids. We're then putting 1 point into Mending. That's just so that we can unlock Provocation, and we're going to put 3 points into Provocation. That's a passive. When you remain in werebear form for at least 24 seconds, your next non-defensive skill will overpower. At low level, overpower is super strong. Overpower scales based on max life and fortify. We're stacking a lot of that. Then we grab our ultimate Grizzly Rage all the way into Supreme Grizzly Rage. Next, we're taking 3 points in the Quick Shift passive. This gives us a bit more damage, and we're taking 1 point in Abundance to get a bit more spirit generated. Then we're taking the Ursine Strength Key passive. We're a werebear, it makes sense. More damage, more life. From there, you max out the Abundance passive. That's going to be, again, a lot more spirit. And then we're going to max out Ancestral Fortitude. This gives us some nice resists. Resists become quite important in Season 2. Not as important early game, but the later in the game you go, the more important your resists become. You're going to feel the lack of them if you just ignore them. After that, max out Poison Creeper to make that deal more damage. Then put 3 points into Wild Impulses. This will make Pulverize cost more spirit, but deal even more damage than the cost. It's worth the trade-off. Then put 1 point into Predatory Instinct. 2% more crit chance to close enemies. Then you're going to max out Crushing Earth. You might wonder why. Earth skills deal more damage to crowd-controlled enemies, but we don't have any Earth skills. Well, about that, we're going to get to the aspects in a bit here, but prior to this point, you need to have farmed up, deterministically, an aspect of Ursine Horror. You do this by completing the Belfry Zakara in Hawazar Dungeon. This will unlock it in your codex. So you don't have to wait for a drop, you just go run that dungeon and then you can imprint this aspect. This aspect makes Pulverize count as an earth skill, and after casting Pulverize, Tectonic Spikes continue to deal damage, a bunch of damage over 2 seconds. So it's more damage, and now we're getting to synergize it with earth skills. So Crushing Earth, now we're dealing more damage. Then we're going to max out Safeguard. Again, Earth skills. Critical strikes with Earth skills fortify you. More synergy there. Then we're maxing out Stone Guard. While you have Fortify for over 50% of your max life, your Earth skills deal even more damage. And then lastly, we put another point into Predatory Instinct. So before we get onto the aspects, let's talk about the Spirit Boons. At level 15, you're going to unlock your Druid class quest. Do this immediately. Don't delay because you are leaving power behind. You're going to have to play catch up later. Once you unlock your Druid Spirit quest, you start to get Spirit Boons, and you can spend those Spirit Boons to upgrade your animal spirits in order to gain various buffs. So the first thing you want to unlock is the Wolf Spirit Boon Pack Leader. On lucky hit, critical strikes have up to a 20% chance to reset the cooldown of your companion skills. That's going to be Poison Creeper, so we can pop Poison Creeper more often. Next, you'll want to unlock the Eagle Spirit Scythe Talons. This gives us more crit strike chance. Then you want to save up a bunch to unlock the Snake Spirit's Obsidian Slam. Every 20th kill will cause your next Earth skill to overpower. Overpower, just crazy damage again. Then save up for the Deer Spirit's Wariness. 10% reduced damage from elites, more tanky. Then you're going to wait a whole while, save up a ton of spirit. You're then going to bond with the Eagle Spirit. This is what allows you to have a second. So for every spirit, you can have one of their boons unlocked. Until you complete everything, then you can select one spirit to bond with and have 2 of their boons. So you're going to select the Eagle Spirit's Swooping Attacks for 10% attack speed so that we're generating resource faster. So let's talk now about the gear and the aspects. Leveling in Season 2 is really fast. You don't have to fuss too much over your gear. Your biggest priority is ensuring you're always holding the highest DPS two-handed weapon you can possibly find. Once you get a nice new weapon that's a significant upgrade over your previous one, it's worth going to the blacksmith, dropping a couple upgrades on that. It's not worth upgrading any other piece of your gear at the blacksmith. If you have sockets in your weapon, slap rubies in there for more overpower damage. Outside of that, if you can find gloves with ranks to pulverize, you can keep those forever. Outside of that, move speed on boots or amulet, really important. You're super slow. In general, affixes, life, helpful for you. Cooldown could be nice. Willpower, overpower damage, damage reduction. But again, don't fuss too much. 1 to 50 goes really fast. You're going to constantly get new gear drops. Your main priority is unlocking World Tier 3 as soon as possible and getting access to that sacred gear. Alright, let's talk about aspects now. As we said previously, the most important aspect for this build is the Shockwave aspect. It's the only aspect that you cannot get deterministically into your codex. In Season 1 you could have, which is what made this build like the best leveling build for Druid in Season 1. Now you gotta wait for it as a drop. If you do happen to get it, imprint that on your amulet. Do not imprint anything ever onto your weapon, because you're gonna be swapping out your weapon very often. You might say, yeah, but on a two-handed weapon we get double the effect of the aspect. This is true, but it's not worth having a lower DPS weapon, and you can't keep imprinting. It's expensive. You're not going to find multiple shockwave drops either. So on your amulet is something that's going to gain a 50% bonus to the aspect, and you can hold on to your amulet from level 10 to 50. It doesn't really matter if you have a very low level amulet. What's more important is keeping that aspect. Now I'll mention some other aspects that are helpful to this build, but not necessary. If you find these, equip them, they're useful to you. These are also aspects that you could unlock into your codex. But again, resources are scant at low level and they might not always be worth the upgrade. So if you happen to get a aspect of might, basic skills grant 20% damage reduction. That could be a nice source of extra toughness. If you get an aspect of the changeling's debt, damaging a poisoned enemy with the werebear skill will instantly deal up to 150% of the poisoning damage and consume the poisoning. Nice interaction with your poison creeper. Another good one is aspect of the rampaging werebeast. The duration of Grizzly Rage is increased by up to 5 seconds, and you also gain more crit damage. This is a really powerful one that we're going to want eventually. It's a little less effective at low level, but nonetheless, it's a nice one to have. And another good one is aspect of retaliation. Your core skills deal up to 40% increased damage based on your amount of fortify. We can stack a good amount of fortify. Now, there's some other aspects that become useful once you start segueing into the Earth skill combination. So this would require the offensive aspect of the Earth sign Horror. This is worth unlocking at the dungeon. This again transforms Pulverize into an Earth skill. You need to farm this at some point in order to let those passives in the skill tree interact with this, but you can do it earlier as well if you want, especially if you happen to get some of these supporting legendary aspects that go well with Earth skills. For instance, aspect of Quicksand. Damage from Earth skills slows enemies by up to 50% for 5 seconds. This combines really well with an aspect of the Umbral. Restore resource when you crowd control an enemy. This helps immensely with resource generation. If you happen to get as a drop the Crash Stone aspect, Earth skills deal up to 40% more crit strike damage to crowd controlled enemies. Nice damage buff there. You would swap out the aspect of Changeling's Debt in that case for Crash Stone. Aspect of Mending Stone. The duration of Earthen Bulwark is increased by 6 seconds. In addition, killing an enemy with Earth skills replenishes an amount of your active Earthen Bulwark's barrier. Now we're replenishing it because Pulverize is an Earth skill. And then the Ballistic aspect, when you have Fortify, your Earth skills gain +2 ranks. Hey, that's more damage now, because Pulverize is an Earth skill. Now for the Season 2 Blood powers, the Vampiric powers, the 5 that you're going to want to equip and level up are Ravenous, on lucky hit, 20% chance to increase your attack speed by 40% and move speed for 6 seconds. Our slow butt moves faster, and we can use our generator faster to regain more spirit. Hemomancy, so strong at low level. This makes you basically unkillable. Your attacks deal some amount of damage to nearby enemies, which honestly is like a full screen away, once every 4 seconds, and you heal for 1% of your max life for each enemy damaged this way. So every 4 seconds, you are scooping up health from everyone on screen. Next, we're taking Blood Boil. When your core skills overpower an enemy, and we're using a lot of overpower, you spawn some blood drops. When you collect them, they explode. dealing a bunch of damage around you, and every 20 seconds your next skill is guaranteed to overpower. Nice synergy with this build. Next, we're taking Prey on the Weak, 16% more damage to vulnerable enemies. And then lastly, Anticipation, 20% cooldown reduction on our ultimates, and your ult deals 12% increased damage for each nearby enemy affected by your damage over time effects. So all that should be able to get you to level 50 quite easily. It might not be the fastest, but it's going to be a smooth ride. At that point, you're a fresh level 50. What is your priority? Now, this is when you start to deterministically farm up all the aspects that you need. So if you haven't already found one or unlocked it, you need to get that aspect of Mending Stone that we just spoke about. Aspect of Might. Aspect of the Umbral. Now, unlike some other builds where you really need to get a good Umbral to drop with like a 3 or 4 roll, even a 1 roll Umbral here that you get from your Codex of Power is useful. And by the way, every aspect that we're talking about here, you can see exactly what dungeon you need to complete in order to unlock it. You want to get a Rapid aspect, Retaliation, Quicksand, Ursine Horror, Rampaging Werebeast, and now Ghostwalker. Ghostwalker, while unstoppable and for 4 seconds after, you gain increased move speed and can move freely through enemies. Helps us with our slow butt and lets us move through enemies after we use Earthen Bulwark. So once you have all those unlocked, you can start slapping things on some gear and putting together a build. So once you have those, now you're going to respec your skill tree to make certain changes. For our generator, we're now going with Maul, Fierce Maul. We're dropping the Storm skill, we're going pure Werebear now. We're now going to want to max out our Predatory Instinct passive and additionally get 3 ranks into Iron Fur for a total of 9% damage reduction while in Werebear form. We're always going to be in Werebear form. Next, we're dropping Poison Creeper entirely and taking Debilitating Roar. This nerfs enemy damage, it grants us Fortify, and with innate Debilitating Roar, it slows enemies, which synergizes with our Umbral to give us back resource. So pop Debilitating Roar only once you're low on Spirit. For our passives after Ancestral Fortitude, we're also taking 3 ranks of Vigilance here. This is for more damage reduction. Then we're going down to 1 rank in Crushing Earth. And instead of Quick Shift, we're going to take 3 ranks into Defiance. Nature Magic skills deal increased damage to elites. And Circle of Life, 2 points here. Nature Magic skills that consume Spirit heal you for 2% of your max life. Remember, Earth skills count as Nature Magic. The gameplay otherwise stays relatively the same. Again, you're just losing the Poison Creeper, and now you're just more Werebear. With this starter version of the build, your priority now is getting to World Tier 4. This should be possible by level 60. If you're in a group or really good, you can do it before that. I did it with a partner at level 56, and I didn't even have a Shockwave aspect. At this point, you'll want to have your aspect of Retaliation on your 2-handed weapon. You're ideally going for a 2-handed staff. This is because it gives you more damage to crowd-controlled enemies. This is our most important stat right now. We're also going to be putting Sapphires into our weapon for more crit strike damage to crowd-controlled enemies. Putting Retaliation on the staff is going to double its effectiveness. So we're getting up to 80% more damage based on our amount of Fortify. Unless you're using, again, from the Codex, then it's 40%. Still a not insignificant damage buff. Now, once you get a Shockwave aspect to drop, that's when you go Turbo Mode. Shockwave will replace Retaliation. Shockwave is a pretty rare drop. It becomes more common the higher level you go. Now, when you get your Shockwave aspect to drop, you gotta make a judgment call. How often are you upgrading your weapon, or how soon do you foresee your next weapon upgrade? If you are in World Tier 3 and you're coming up on World Tier 4, you have a Sacred Weapon, and you know Ancestral Weapons are right around the corner, don't waste your 1 Shockwave aspect on your Sacred Weapon. Wait to get that Ancestral upgrade. Or you could even put it on an Amulet. It's not going to be as effective, but you still get the benefit of it, and you can still swap out your weapon freely without losing your Shockwave. Because nothing would suck more than putting your singular Shockwave aspect on a Sacred Weapon, and then within half an hour, unlocking World Tier 4 and getting an Ancestral Weapon upgrade that you can't swap to because you would lose your Shockwave. So we'll transition to talking about the best in slot setup for this mid-game build. We're not yet talking about the super late game, but this is going to be your go-to, what you're aiming for the mid-game. If you can get the unique item to drop, Vasili's Prayer, which you can deterministically farm off of Varshan in, well, it's not just Season 2, even non-season, you can farm this off of Varshan. The Vasili's Prayer Helm will make your Earth skills now count as werebear skills, and they're going to fortify you when you use them. If you can get an Insatiable Fury unique to drop, which you can farm off of the Beast in Ice boss, this is going to make your werebear form now your true form and give you +3 to all your werebear skills. Once you get this, you would need to move the Quicksand aspect to your boots. You're going to lose some mobility, but it's worth it for the extra damage that Insatiable Fury brings. So your endgame gear setup's going to look something like a Vasily's Prayer as your helm, an Insatiable Fury as your chest. Then on your gloves, between your gloves and your 2 rings, these are the 3 aspects you want. Ursine Horror, Umbral, Rampaging Werebeast. It doesn't matter which you get where, but those are the 3 that you need across those 3 slots. Your pants, you're going to want a well-rolled Disobedience. If you're using a Codex power, stick with Might, but once you get a well-rolled Disobedience, that replaces your aspect of Might. This gives you a stacking armor buff. For your boots, you're running Ghostwalker until you get that unique chest piece, then again you're moving Quicksand there. You need that Quicksand to trigger the Umbral for resource generation. Your weapon again will be your Shockwave Staff. Staff is what you're looking for, again for that more damage to crowd-controlled enemies, 2-hander. At that point, you're going to move Retaliation onto your Amulet. You're keeping Retaliation, but moving on to the Amulet, and that covers your aspects. Now, once you get this Vasily's, that's when you can change up your skill setup as well. Again, your Earth skills are now also werebear skills. So we are now dropping Maul. Instead, we're taking Earth Spike, Wild Earth Spike. This lets us generate Spirit at range now, and we can use it as a werebear. We're going to drop Abundance, and that's so that we can put 3 points into Natural Disaster. Your Earth skills deal more damage to vulnerable enemies, and your Storm skills deal more damage to stunned, immobilized, and knockbacked enemies. We're also going to shift 2 points from Safeguard into Crushing Earth to max that out. We're dropping some Fortify to gain some more damage. For our Spirit boons, we want with the Deer, Wariness, with the Eagle, Scythe Talons, with the Wolf, Calamity, extends the duration of our ultimates by 25%, and for the Snake, Obsidian Slam, and Calm Before the Storm. With Calm Before the Storm, nature magic skills have up to a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 2 seconds. This gives us more uptime on our Grizzly Rage. For your vampiric powers, you're going to change them a little bit here. We're keeping Ravenous, we're keeping Anticipation, we're keeping Blood Boil, we're keeping Prey on the Weak. But we're swapping out Hemomancy. It served us well at lower levels, but it doesn't scale as well as some of these other powers. Instead, we're taking Accursed Touch. On lucky hit, a chance to inflict vampiric curse on enemies. Afflicted enemies have a 15% chance to spread it to other enemies, and so this synergizes with Prey on the Weak, because with Prey on the Weak, enemies are vulnerable while affected by vampiric curse. So you're easily spreading vampiric curse to enemies, and then that makes them vulnerable, and then you're dealing more damage to vulnerable enemies. Now, for exactly what stats you want on every piece of gear here. First off, for your gems, in your helm, body armor, and pants, you want rubies for more max life. In your weapon, you're going to want emeralds for more crit strike damage. And in your jewelry, you're going to see how your resists are doing, and you're going to just pop in whatever fills in your resistances. For a weapon, you're looking for a high DPS 2-handed staff. And then your other 4 perfect stats are willpower, all stats, damage to crowd-controlled enemies, and core skill damage. For your helm, before you have a Vasily's Prayer, you want cooldown, max life, and then 2 resistances. For your chest, before you get the Insatiable Fury, you're going to want 4 damage reduction stats. Damage reduction while fortified, damage reduction from distant enemies, damage reduction against close enemies, and then just damage reduction. For your gloves, you want ranks to Pulverize, crit strike chance, attack speed, lucky hit chance. For your pants, you want the implicit power that potions grant barrier. Then you want 3 damage reduction stats, damage reduction while fortified, damage reduction against distance, close, and then % total armor while in werebear form. For your boots, you want move speed, spirit cost reduction, dodge chance, and willpower. For your amulet, you want cooldown reduction, spirit cost reduction, move speed, and then plus ranks to crushing earth. Then on your rings, you want crit strike chance, lucky hit chance, max life, damage to close enemies. Now, that said, you will need to work in damage to crowd-controlled enemies. You can get this on your rings, you can get this on your staff. You need to reach a total bonus of 150% damage to crowd-controlled enemies. 45% of this needs to come from your gear, either your staff and or your rings. So what this would generally mean is one roll on your staff, one roll on your rings, and you're good. So just get on one of your rings damage to crowd-controlled enemies. And this is to synergize with a legendary node on the Paragon board, which we'll cover soon. And by soon, I mean right now. So you're going to start off in your Paragon board with Exploit. More vulnerable damage, and you make enemies vulnerable every so often when you damage them. For the next board, you want Ancestral Guidance. You're going to grab that legendary node. After spending 75 spirit, you deal 30% increased damage for 5 seconds. You're then going to grab the Glyph Socket and socket in Werebear. More damage while in Werebear form, and you gain 10% damage reduction while in Werebear form. Then we go for the Survival Instincts Paragon board. We're going to grab that legendary node. While in Werebear form, you deal 1% increased damage up to 50% multiplicative for every 1% difference in current life percent between you and the enemy. Then we grab the Glyph Socket and we're going to put Dominate in there. Don't level Dominate beyond level 15 because it's only a temporary glyph. This gives us more overpower damage, and when you overpower an enemy, all damage they take from you is increased by 12% for 5 seconds. Dominate falls off later on. For your next board, we're taking Constricting Tendrils. We're not getting the legendary node. We're going to grab the socket slot, and we're putting in Territorial. More damage to close enemies, and 10% damage reduction against close enemies. Next, we'll get Earthen Devastation. We're going to start by getting the Glyph Socket, Fang and Claw. More all resist. More critical strike damage with earth skills, and close enemies take more damage from us while we are shapeshifted. We then go grab the legendary node. Your earth skills deal 10% increased critical strike damage, increased by 20% of your damage versus crowd controlled bonus up to 40%. That's why we need to max out that crowd controlled damage stat, which is why we need it on our staff and one ring. You can refer to the max roll guide for exactly how to allocate every single Paragon point. And then your final Paragon board setup, which is once you have your Vasily's Prayer and your Insatiable Fury uniques, will look like this. You're going to want Territorial. In your first board, you'll want to have leveled up an Earth and Sky to level 15 before you respec your Paragon board to this. Earth and Sky gives you more shapeshifting skill damage, more armor, dex, intelligence, and nature skills deal more damage to crowd controlled or vulnerable enemies. This will be on the Inner Beast board, but we're not taking the Inner Beast aspect. To the left, you're going to take Ancestral Guidance. You're still taking that legendary node. In the Glyph Socket, we're taking Outmatch here. To the right of Inner Sky, we're going with Earthen Devastation and Werebear. We are taking the legendary node. We are taking the Glyph Socket, of course. To the right of that, Survival Instincts with Exploit in it. We are taking the Survival Instincts legendary node. And above that, we're taking Constricting Tendrils with now Fang and Claw. We're not taking the Constricting Tendrils legendary node, but we are taking the socket. Fang and Claw giving us more nature magic skill damage, more max life, and close enemies taking more damage from us. Now there's one final variation of this build that we're going to cover, and it's arguably the best version of the build. But you absolutely need to have a Tempest Roar before you can run this version of the build. And it changes things substantially. We go from Werebear to dual shapeshifter Werebear Werewolf. With a Tempest Roar, your base storm skills are now also werewolf skills. And lucky hit, storm skills have a chance to grant 4 spirit. For our skill setup, we're changing things up significantly. For our generator, we're now getting Wind Shear, Fierce Wind Shear again. We are dropping Earthen Bulwark, instead we're getting Blood Howl, Preserving Blood Howl. This shapeshifts us into a werewolf, heals us, and increases our attack speed. And killing enemies will reduce the cooldown on Blood Howl. We're dropping our 1 point in Mending and instead putting it into Neurotoxin. Poisoned enemies are slowed by 8%. We're dropping our 1 point in Circle of Life and putting that instead into Toxic Claws. Critical strikes with werewolf skills deal 8% of their base damage as poisoning damage over 8 seconds. So we are now switching to a poisoning build, working that into the mix. We're dropping Grizzly Rage as an ultimate altogether and taking instead the Envenom passive. You and your companion gain 10% bonus critical strike damage against poisoned enemies. And we're swapping out Earthsign Strength as a key passive for Earthen Might. Damaging enemies with Earth skills has a chance to restore all of your spirit and cause your attacks to be guaranteed crits for 5 seconds, and this increases to 10% against crowd-controlled enemies. We're also removing 3 points from Provocation. We're not using any Overpower anymore, and instead working in Hurricane, Savage Hurricane. This is going to slow crowd control enemies around us and make them deal less damage. For our Spirit Boons, we're not using an ult anymore, so for the Wolf Spirit, we're going to Bolster, Fortify whenever you use a defensive skill. For Snake, we're removing the previous two and instead going with Masochistic. Crits with shapeshifting skills have up to a 75% chance to heal you for 3% of your max life, giving us some nice sustain, and instead we're going to bond with the Eagle to add swooping attacks for 10% attack speed. Now I want to make a couple gear changes as well here. As we said, Vasilis becomes Tempest Roar. We no longer need Insatiable Fury, so we're going with a chest piece with Might on it, the quad damage reduction while fortified, from close enemies, from distant enemies, and from poisoned enemies. We're poisoning all enemies now. We're keeping Ursine Horror, we're keeping Umbral, but we're swapping out Rampaging Werebeast for Natural Balance. Casting a Storm skill grants your Earth skills up to 45% more crit strike damage for 4 seconds, and casting an Earth skill increases the critical strike chance of Storm skills by 12% for 4 seconds. The other change you'll want to make is on your Amulet. Instead of ranks to Crushing Earth, you'll want ranks to Envenom. For your vampiric powers, you're going to drop Anticipation because you're not using an ult anymore, and instead get Sanguine Brace. When you kill an enemy, Fortify, and when you have more Fortify than half of your max current life, you gain 8% crit strike chance. We're going to remove Blood Boil because we don't have Overpower anymore, and instead take Resilience. You gain 1% damage reduction for each 2% of your life missing. Then, because we're losing Earthen Bulwark and Grisly Rage, which were two significant sources of Unstoppable, we're going to have to drop Accursed Touch and instead take Metamorphosis. When you evade, you turn into a cloud of bats, becoming unstoppable for 4 seconds, and you inflict enemies with Vampiric Curse when you pass through them. Paragon boards look similar, except now on the Inner Beast board, you do want to get the Inner Beast Legendary. After shapeshifting, your spirit costs are reduced by 10% for 5 seconds. Before we were always a bear, now we're going bear, wolf, bear, wolf, bear, wolf, so you're always benefiting from this. Ancestral Guidance board stays the same, Earthen Devastation the same, Survival Instincts the same, but now for Constricting Tendrils instead of Fang and Claw, we're going with the Spirit Glyph. More crit strike damage, a whole bunch of it, and critical strikes increase the damage an enemy takes from you by up to 12%. And that is going to wrap up this video. Again, maxroll.gg, I know that was a lot of information, but you can always refer to the written guides there for easy reference. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more Diablo content.